All right, everybody, it is time to get started. We've had a question about ASL interpreters. Are there ASL interpreters on the call? That's usually set up by the agency of the requesting party. If there are, would you mind identifying yourselves? Otherwise, I'm not sure that we have them. But we do have closed captioning that you could take advantage of. Hopefully that will work if we don't indeed have ASL interpreters on. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. Just again, kind of to reiterate, Shane earlier mentioned that this session will be recorded. We are recording this session right now. So if you don't want to be featured in the video, feel free to keep your camera off. And we'll get started here. Oh, look, there's a magic 8-ball as part of the title of the session today. Let's just see if it works. Is this session being recorded? Yeah, looks like it works. I'm not sure why I would do that to myself, but there you go. Magic 8-ball. I'm only going to use that gimmick another 3 times today, so get ready for that. This is me. I'm Rick Murdoch. I work with DHRM. I'm in the Leadership and Organizational Development Group, Senior Leadership Specialist. I would love for you to take note of that email address there at the bottom, rsmurdoch@utah.gov. That's if you have questions or if you'd like to further engage on this topic, feel free to hang on to that email address and reach out. It's been a while since I've done one of these off-the-shelf sessions, almost a year, in fact. And I'm really happy to get back to it. I'm glad to be able to spend some time with y'all talking about a leadership topic that I think is really important in today's world, but it's also pretty complex. So we'll do what we can today in an hour or less. But these sessions are really meant for you to kind of get you thinking and give you a tool or two or something to practice. So if you approach it that way, we might find some value here today. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before we jump into that, next month on Off the Shelf, Tara Connolly will be presenting Quiet Quitting Needs Loud Leadership. That mark your calendars, November 29th, 2023 at 10 a.m. Put that on your calendar. You'll want to see this one. This is really about that whole concept of quiet quitting, which as we're learning more and more about, it's unengaged team members. So Tara will address some ways to help re-engage folks if you've got people that are in that camp. There's some things we can do. All right, let's jump in. I haven't planned, and this is kind of on purpose, I haven't planned an opening statement for today. Instead, I've written a prompt that I'm going to paste into an AI bot to ask for it to create my opening statement. So I'm just going to go ahead on my other screen here and paste this prompt. There's the prompt right there. You can see what I have written to make this opening statement, and enter. Waiting for it to load. Maybe this wasn't a great idea to do in real time. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our Off the Shelf for October 2023. Today's session is titled, For Your Information, in Search of a Magic 8-Ball. In this age of information overload, we often find ourselves yearning for a magic 8-ball, a reliable source that can provide clear, accurate, and trustworthy answers to our complex questions. Today, we will embark on a journey to explore the importance of good information and its role in enhancing credibility. We will delve into the art of sifting through the maze of misinformation and disinformation that clouds our judgment. And finally, we will discuss how artificial intelligence can serve as a decision-making tool for leaders, acting as our very own magic 8-ball in this digital era. Let's begin this enlightening journey together. Hey, that wasn't too bad. That was an okay opening statement. We're going to talk a little bit about AI as a tool. That'll be later in the discussion this morning. But the idea here is that we have a new tool that we probably need to get familiar with. Now, I am not a cutting-edge expert on this tool. I've just done a little bit of research, and so I'll share what I've found, but really we should think of this as kind of a stepping off point rather than as the end point. About 20 years ago, we started hearing this idea that we were living in the information age. Do you remember hearing that a lot? The internet had become ubiquitous. We had Google and Bing and Ask Jeeves telling us whatever we wanted to know. Back in 2008, I heard someone refer to information as the new oil. And someone else said, no, 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 it's not the new oil, it's the new soil. Oops, I was supposed to hit that button. Okay. Think about what that implies. What kinds of issues accompany oil and land disputes out in the world? What are people willing to do to get control of oil and land? Are those things happening around the need to control information? Around that same time, 2008, social media came along, and everybody now has access to information distribution channels, right? Anyone and everyone has the ability to become content creators. There's no vetting, no training on what makes for good, trustworthy sources, just us and an open text field and an unlimited potential audience. And right from the beginning, people just kind of started making things up. Misinformation, which is the unintentional spreading of bad information, and disinformation, which is the intentional spreading of bad information to create chaos, just kind of became part of our daily information intake. And it took us a while and a few awkward conversations with Grandma, you can't post that, to realize what was happening. But over the last half decade or so, and this is according to Edelman's Trust Barometer, which is a group that goes out and tests trust levels for various things. According to them, we as a group, a society, we've begun to just stop trusting things that we once trusted. Trust in government is way down. Trust in media, way down, and probably for good reason. Trust in even the idea that we might be better off in a few years is way down. So I probably should mention here that I'm not going to talk about anything specific today when it comes to information. I'm not going to be calling out any groups or parties. I will, however, try to introduce some tools that can help us navigate the reality we find ourselves living in. And I'll try to do it in context of work and positive, profitable business outcomes. Hopefully we can find some things together that will help. But you, as a leader, you have a claim on some of this new oil, soil. Your stock in this sector is really based on your ability to share good information. And that ability to share good information translates into what we would call credibility. Credibility leads to some really great business outcomes for you and your team. And credibility is something that we really need to build if we're going to lead teams. In fact, if we're going to do anything, credibility is a really good commodity to try to build. So here's a definition. I just took this from Google. Credibility is the quality of being trusted and believed in. The quality of being convincing or believable. And then we all know what street cred is. That's really it. Kouzes and Posner, who literally wrote the book on credibility, that's the title of their book, Credibility. They broke it down this way. There are 3 qualities that make you a believable source of information, or as we just defined it, credible. Being trustworthy, being an expert, and being dynamic. Those 3 things work together to build credibility in leaders and people in general. We're not going to touch too much on the last 2, expertise and dynamism, other than to say that expertise is your ability to do your job well, and dynamism is consistency of effort and consistency of striking the right balance at the right time. Those 2 things probably warrant their own discussion in future sessions, but we are going to focus in on trustworthiness today. When trust is high, outcomes are good. That's probably no secret. I mean, that's not a surprise to anybody, but when trust is high in a corporation or in an agency, within teams, within relationships, when trust is high, outcomes are good. This is from an article written by Paul J. Zak in the HBR. It's called The Neuroscience of Trust. Compared with people at low trust companies, people at high trust companies report 74% less stress. 106% more energy at work. We'll have to get into that in a second. 50% higher productivity, 13% fewer sick days, 76% more engagement, 29% more satisfaction with their lives, and then 40% less burnout. These are amazing outcomes that come from just being able to associate with people that you trust, working in a high trust agency or a high trust company. Meaning we trust the people we work with, our peers, we trust our supervisors, we trust the leadership of the company, we trust, and they trust us. Imagine your team at over 100% energy. I assume that means that 100% is the baseline and it's just a little bit more energy, 6% more. But imagine them at over 100% energy. At that point, you're like, everybody calm down. And everybody's like, no, we can't calm down because our stress levels are 70% lower than they were last week because we trust each other. Oh, here's another magic 8-ball. I'm not sure why I did this to myself, but let's ask it something. Magic 8-ball, should we be intentionally building a culture of trust in our teams? Signs point to yes. You know, sometimes that's easier said than done. Trust in general is down, like we mentioned with the Edelman's Trust Barometer. In fact, it's way down. We keep getting burned by people who spin the facts and outright liars. And the fact is, we really can't control others. We have to start with ourselves. Even grandma is going to post that propaganda 20 out of 20 times. She doesn't listen. She doesn't get it. We have to start with ourselves. We have to realize that we, and pretty much everybody else, is in something of a curated echo chamber. This is a depiction of an echo chamber. You see all those arrows pointing in, creating this nice little comfort echo chamber for this, the outline of a person there. We don't like hearing what doesn't jive with our belief systems. We like to feel comfortable. We like to feel certain. So we tend to surround ourselves with comfortable information and like-minded people. This is particularly true for those of us that participate in social media. We'll talk about that more in just a second. Let's define echo chamber for just a second here. Helpfulprofessor.com defines it this way: a closed system in which individuals don't hear much that we've got a little bit of comments being made in the chat. Feel free to keep doing that. Take a look at it, everybody, as we go. I think there's some important things happening. We'll talk more about what we can and can't use as far as tools go. DTS just put out a policy just last month that covers all of us, and we'll get to that in just a minute. An echo chamber is a closed system in which individuals don't hear much that contradict or speak negatively of their beliefs. And as such, their beliefs are further reinforced, ultimately leading to a kind of intellectual isolationism. Echo chambers increase social and political polarization. They result in extremism and severely hamper civil discourse. And really, what we're talking about here is social media platforms. We don't really need to get into much to social media because in a work setting, social media is kind of outside of our scope, right? But it probably means that we are, and people around us are, in echo chambers. And somewhat of echo chambers of our own curation. They kind of spin around us. And these four people, they might be in close proximity. They might live under the same roof. They might work in the same office. And the four of them are seeing very different views of the world. And in fact, sometimes when a new thought comes into the echo chamber, at least in the setting of social media, we have this opportunity to just say, I'm going to block that person. And then they go away, right? Ooh, another magic 8-ball. Can we minimize the effects of our echo chambers, magic 8-ball? Most likely. Okay, so how do we do that? I think I can illustrate what happens to us on this next slide. If you're photosensitive or you're prone to motion sickness from like kind of movement on slides, you may want to just minimize your tab for a second or open a new tab. I'll do my best to describe what's happening for those of you that need to minimize. The rest of you, I'm going to put up a slide with some pink dots and a black plus sign. Your job is to put your eyes on the black plus sign and just kind of hold them there. You can blink, just don't look around much. Just look at that black plus sign, okay? Here comes the slide. All right, there it is. Just put your eyes on the black plus sign there. You'll notice that there's a green dot going around in a circle with some pink dots. If you hold your eyes right on that plus sign, the green dot will start to become more and more important to your brain, and those pink dots will start to just fade away. Your perspective will change slightly. For some of you, it'll be easier than for others, but those pink dots will start to fade away. So just hold your eyes on that plus sign, see if it happens. Blink a little bit and they'll re-articulate, but eventually they'll just go away. Your brain will be like, yeah, those aren't important. The important thing is the movement. The important thing then is the movement. I guess we have a raised hand here. Is there a question? Okay. Now, what if I were to tell you, though, that that green dot just doesn't exist? The green dot does not even exist. Go ahead and follow it with your eyes. See, it's not there. It's an optical illusion. And me focusing your attention on that plus sign made it very real, made it very important to your brain. Our brain does this. Our brain makes interpretations and does things without us knowing about it all the time. If I had brought you into this slide instead of saying, put your eyes on the black plus sign and said, hey, take a look at this slide, you may have looked around and seen, oh, fun visual illusion. Or you may have read those paragraphs that explain what's happening. And then you would know there's no green dot. In a lot of our information gathering, we're presented with this idea that people are telling us to look at plus signs and distracting us away from reality. And we're seeing things that aren't necessarily real. When people do it on purpose, that's disinformation. When they do it on accident, just because they too have been looking at the plus sign, that's called misinformation. Now, the idea here is that some actors want us looking at that plus sign because they get something out of it. When our eyeballs go back to the same thing over and over again, they get advertising dollars or something like that. So information's less important to them than getting the eyeballs on that plus sign. That happens, right? Let me get you off of that slide so you're not getting sick. Okay, so we're back to just a normal slide. Those of you that have that stepped out of the session for a second can come on back. I've got a couple of tools and an article to share with you that might help with this phenomenon. I'm borrowing both of these models, the CRAP model, the SIFT model, from librarians whose business it is to provide excellent information. That's their job, librarians. I'm not going to get into the article so much today, except for to say that if you want some strategies for stopping disinformation, this is a pretty good article. One key point that they make in this article is that any engagement with disinformation amplifies it, even if you're putting them in their place. Because of the algorithms, even clicking on to say this is not true actually tells the algorithm, no, this is important, we got to send it to more people. So that's just one thought. Okay, so let's look at these models. We focused so far today kind of on social media, maybe a little too much, because our end goal is credibility, and we're not likely to get credibility through our social media channels. It'll come more in the way that we handle more traditional information with our teams and our families and our community groups, etc. But these models can help us as we vet information, any type of information. The first model is called the CRAP model. There are 4 elements to it, and I borrowed this from a librarian at Brigham Young University, the Harold B. Lee Library, a coworker of mine down there. I teach a class at BYU, evening adjunct faculty. This person brought this to our attention. I really like it. I think it's a pretty good model for helping us vet information when we're worried about whether the information is accurate or not. I'm going to just give you some questions to ask yourself in each of these areas. First, with the current element, we can ask ourselves, how recently was this published or updated? How current are the sources and the content? What's the context? And is this outdated? Those are the questions we can ask. We can check the last time that the page was updated or when the article was published. When there's dead links within an article, that usually means that the page is outdated. Also, just keep in mind if there are charts in the information that you're looking at, that you're vetting, and those charts are giving you information of a statistical, some sort of statistical information. If there's not a date associated with that statistical information, it's best practice not to use it. So we don't use undated statistical information. And we're going to check to see how often and how recently things are updated. Let's look at the reliable section here. Here's some questions to ask. If the information is well organized, well written, and well presented, that usually means that somebody, it indicates a little better reliability. We can also look for sources within the information, and are those sources cited? And are those cited sources easily verifiable? Is there a direct link to the source, or can we find the source fairly easily? And also, as we've read through the article, do the conclusions that the people make, the writers make, do they flow from the evidence? Have they actually made a good argument? It's a good question to ask. And then finally, if we're looking for reliability, there's kind of tiers of reliability within the domains. .com often means that there's some financial mission that they're trying to meet, so they're probably trying to sell something. .edu, .gov, and .org groups are often tied to a mission that also includes reputation. And when you have something tied to a mission that includes reputation, it's more likely that they'll vet their information and make it more reliable. So we're going to look for sites that don't have an economic bias. We're going to check for biases. We're going to check for reputation. If we want to limit our searches in Google to .govs, .edus, .orgs, that type of thing, it's easy to do. Just as part of the search, just type the word site, S-I-T-E : and then add whatever type of site you want to get. So SITE : .gov, and that will return only .gov websites and sources. All right, looking at the next group, authoritative. Oops, I went the wrong direction. There we go. Here's some questions we can ask. Who are the authors? What are their credentials? Have they been cited by other sources on the topic? Can they be contacted? Are they open to letting you ask questions about their stuff? Are they actual people? Those are the questions we can ask. I like the one where we're asking if they've been cited by other sources on the topic. If they're being cited by other sources on the topic, then it's likely that they're thought of as an expert on that topic. Does that mean that they always get every bit of information right? No, not necessarily. But it does mean that they're in that topic and that they're an expert in that topic. It's always a good idea to read the About Us section in any periodical or website that we're visiting. It will give us an idea of the mission and what they're hoping to get out of the information that they're sharing. We can check their credentials or qualifications. We can look at their biography and history, and we can get an idea for what their biases might be. Everybody has biases. We can filter those biases when we know what they are. So it's good to go try to find them. And then finally, looking at purpose, we can ask ourselves these questions. Is the article written as part of a popular media, or is it written in a professional setting, or is it written in an academic setting? Is the information coming from a values or mission-driven author, and what would those biases, what biases would those things introduce? Is the author or organization profit-driven? Are we trying to sell something? And when we ask those questions, we can start to really kind of uncover potential biases. All right, so that one, this model, the CRAP model, sorry, I keep saying that, but the CRAP model is maybe a little bit more intensive, more time intensive than we have time for when we're just trying to decide whether our information is good or not. So I have another model for you that's maybe a little less time intensive. This comes from a librarian at Stanford University. It's called the SIFT model. Stop, investigate, find, and trace. SIFT. So with stop, before you read or share media, stop, ask yourself if you know the source of the information, check the facts and reputation of the claims in the website, check the publication's reputation, verify claims and if we're reading a newspaper or an industry article. As you research though, and part of I'm sorry, I've been not doing this. As your research, though, part of this is to stop every once in a while and say, okay, what is my strategy for finding good information? Am I doing what I ought to do here? This is just basically reminding us to take a step back and say, okay, there might be issues. What are those issues and how do we find them? Then we jump in and try to find the issues. Now, this is, we're suggesting just 60 seconds. So don't take a ton of time doing this, but you can go to Google or go to Wikipedia and just find out who produced the information. Is it worth your time? Does it have significance, and what is the level of trustworthiness that I feel for this after doing just a quick research on this, on the information? The idea here is that people can present themselves in a way that looks great, but if we do just a little bit of searching around, often they'll reveal their biases, and then we can see what their end goals are. The next one is find better coverage. See if the article's claims are true and if it represents some sort of a consensus, or if it's an outlier. It's okay if it's an outlier, that's okay, but it's good to know that. Look for trusted reporting, look for analysis on the claim, find the best source for this topic, and then check the context and history. And this can all be done really quickly through a really quick 60-second Google search. You find out what group is presenting it, you go look and see when they were established, what was the goal of them being established, what are they trying to accomplish, and then finally trace any claims back to the original context. If you're seeing quotes and those quotes are making a point, it's kind of worth your time to just say, okay, is this what this quote actually is meant to say? A lot of times we'll find that on the internet, things have been stripped out of context, and claims have been made that aren't necessarily what the original source intended. And it's good to go kind of double check that, especially if it doesn't feel quite right. Oh, I didn't do this, man. Oh, another magic 8-ball. All right, we'll ask it. Are there any other tools that can help us avoid misinformation that would harm our credibility? Reply hazy, try again. Oh, geez, why did I do this to myself? All right, any other tools that can help us avoid credibility harming misinformation? Yes, definitely. Okay, thanks. All right, so there are tools out there, and AI is among those tools. And I think AI is actually a very good tool for helping us avoid misinformation. Right now, we're kind of in the middle of the adoption of these types of tools. For some people, okay, so we've got this is the bell curve for tool adoption. We've got the innovator on the far left, early adopters and early majority, late majority, and then laggards. For some people, like people that work at DTS, my guess is that they feel like AI is probably over here, late majority already. If you haven't gotten on board yet, then you're late to the party. But for some of us that don't work in technology services, we're still feeling like we're maybe over here, early adopter, early majority, right? Well, it's time to start thinking as an early adopter. It's time to start thinking about these tools and how they might help us. Now, I'm not saying go out and do it today, because there are policies that we need to look at, and we'll look at them in just a second, that would give us some idea of how we're able as state employees to start using these types of tools. But it is time to start thinking about adoption of these tools, because they can be helpful. I won't watch that. We won't take the time. I mentioned that I teach at BYU in the business school. I do a business writing class, more or less. It's a communication class. We got together as a faculty earlier this year and discussed what AI might mean to our class. A writing class at college where people are really comfortable with technology means that they're going to use AI to help them get through their classes, right? So we decided that, yes, we need, from our syllabus, this is taken from the MCOM 320 syllabus, that's the class I teach, we need to let AI be a tool within our classes. We need to do that. We need to also teach them how to write a prompt. Now, that's difficult when we're learning ourselves, right? But the fact is, and I'll show you an example of this in just a second, if you put garbage into this system, garbage will come out. And And so we have to learn how to refine our prompts and make sure that we're getting good results out of these systems. We also are teaching them that AI is not to be trusted. If you can't verify the fact or the numbers that are coming from AI, they most likely are not accurate. They're actually just generated to look like something that might be true. Also, we have to remember that as the operator of the tool, we're responsible for what comes out of it. If we haven't vetted it correctly, I don't know, we've had several stories in the news about lawyers who are letting AI write their briefs, and those briefs are full of inaccuracies. We are responsible for those errors. And then finally, if someone in our class uses AI to write something, they must cite it. They must do a citation for the AI. And in other words, if you didn't write it, you must cite it. That's true for just about anybody. And we'll see that in just a minute with the state policy. The way that these are cited, by the way, and this may not be helpful for most of us, but a few of you might be helpful too. You cite these as if they were a personal conversation, and you use, say you're using Chat GPT, you use that as the entity that you're having the conversation with. They're cited the same way that you would cite a personal conversation. All right, I've talked about this a little bit. DTS has put out a policy. The scope of the policy says this: the policy applies to all state of Utah executive branch employees, contractors, temporary workers, volunteers, and others. Anybody who utilizes generative AI technologies for or on behalf of the state is covered by this policy. So if you have this idea that I may go give this tool a try, you are covered by this policy. There's a link to the policy right here. We'll send out we'll share this slideshow with you, this slide deck with you, and you can access the policy here. I want to go over the guidelines that they've set. There's 7 guidelines that are set within this policy, DTS's policy, that I think are important to be aware of. There's lots of other things in the policy that that you need to go take a look at if you're planning to use AI. But here are some guidelines just to get us started. First of all, transparency. Users and agencies must be transparent about how they are using generative AI. This includes full attribution to which AI is being used. That's similar to what we talked about with citing for the collegiate class. Accountability. Users and agencies are accountable for the decisions that are made and materials created during the use of AI. You continue to be accountable and responsible for the decisions that are being made. We can't shift it off onto the AI technology. The next one, fairness, is an important one. As we've talked about, we've got lots of biases out here. AI systems are really just as good as the training materials that they are being used to learn from. So they tend to reflect cultural, economic, social biases from the source material that is used for training. So as you're training your AI, be very careful that you're vetting that training material for biases. A couple sets of eyes can help with that. Be aware of that. Then also privacy. We have to be aware that any type of new technology coming out can expose issues within privacy. We have to protect the privacy of individuals. Security. This guideline says that we should take steps to protect the security integrity of AI models, and that DTS cybersecurity staff are available to help with that process. The next one, training. Agencies shall mandate a minimum level of AI training for users responsible for business processes which are incorporating generative AI. In other words, if you are planning to put AI into your business process, you have to have some sort of training. And the training that we're doing right now by me is not it, as you can tell, right? I'm a novice myself. But talk to your agency leaders and your DTS representatives, and we can get something started here if you're looking to ease some of your business processes through AI. And then finally, there's still some legal issues here, as was mentioned before in the chat. Unresolved legal issues surrounding generative AI and data inputs used to create AI models. In other words, people are using copyrighted material to train AI sources without regard for copyright or licensing terms. So when you go to train your AI systems, make sure that you're avoiding using copyrighted stuff that you don't have license or legal access to. It also says here, sources of inputs to models must be reviewed and usage risks must be evaluated. So those are the guidelines. There obviously it's a tool that we're going to need to be adopting. We're going to need to jump into it, and it'll really help us. It's like upgrading from the plow to the tractor. We're still driving the machine, but we're getting a lot more done. And it can be that way. Let me show you a bad example. This is a prompt that I used early on, quite a while ago. I was hoping for a really quick way to outline a presentation and to find credible sources. And so here's the prompt. Create an outline for our training session on integrity. Here are the things I want you to emphasize. And then I want you to provide links to articles from sources like HBR and Forbes. Here's what I got back. You can't see that very well, but it's an outline. The outline was fine. The outline flowed just fine. But the thing I was so excited about was at the bottom of each module was resources, and they had 2 articles, one from HBR and one from Forbes, and the articles were perfect. And then I started clicking on the articles, and they didn't exist. Didn't exist. Didn't exist. And if I scrolled down to the bottom of the outline, it said this: note, the provided links to HBR and Forbes articles are fictional and meant to represent the type of resources that can be used for this training session. Please use updated and relevant articles when conducting the actual training. ChatGPT 3 is a liar. It's really good at talking, but a lot of what comes out of it is not accurate. And so, like we mentioned before, if we don't know that the actual answer to whether or not what it's telling us is true, then just assume it's not. You can't rely on it, at least not at this point. But there are some things that we can do with this technology that is really helpful. It just has to be trained in order to be useful. And you can train it by having it look at examples. Of course, we're going to avoid using other people's copyrighted work as training materials. But there is a way to train through prompt writing. And let me show you. This is from aifire.co. First, define the AI role. And then define the task. Then what format you'd like it to be produced in. The relative tone of the message, the final objective, and then you add any restrictions that you might want to put upon it. For example, here's a prompt. I'm just going to read it to you. Acting as a recruiter, create an email inviting Jane Doe to an interview. Format your output as a formal business email with a formal business tone. The objective is to get Jane to choose an interview time between these 3 possible times, and then I list 3 times. Keep it short by using short sentences with no more than 5 sentences per paragraph and no more than 3 paragraphs total. This is what I got back. Dear Jane Doe, I hope this email finds you well. I'm writing to invite you for an interview for the position you applied for at our company. We were impressed with your application and would like to discuss so on and so forth. It gives the 3 times. Ask her to choose one. And then thank you for considering our company, and signed me. All right, not bad. That's a usable email, isn't it? Now, when you look at it though, after putting all of this information in, I probably could have just written the email, right? I basically wrote the email and then said, hey, write this email. Okay, great. But we're training the AI to do what we want it to do. And we're learning ourselves how to better train. Right here, we don't have any name of the company. I would like to have the name of the company. So next time when I do this, I'm going to add the name of the company. There's some other things I can learn from this. So yeah, okay, it'll do our tasks, but we have to be the person driving the tractor. We have to still do some work. Let me show you another model. This model I think is really helpful for decision making. and probably the reason that we are here today talking about this. It's from Dhananjay Kumar, and it's called A Novel AI Prompting Framework for Decision Making. It's got 3 pieces to it. The first one is subjectivity assessment. The second, contrastive reasoning, and finally, schema analysis. And let me show you what this means. I tested this framework with this prompt. It's a prompt that I found in an article, and I thought, this is relative to, relevant to today. So I asked the bot to analyze this scenario and tell me how it can be interpreted first objectively, then subjectively. Again, going back to the model, subjectivity assessment is the first thing we're going to do. And then I gave it the scenario, and it's basically just a scenario where a few employees have voiced concerns about potential adverse effects of remote work on team unity. So in other words, there's a few folks that are saying this remote work is affecting our team unity. This is what I got back. The first part, the objective interpretation, is just a rehash of the prompt, which you'd expect. That's the objective analysis. The subjective interpretation, though, is really kind of interesting. It gives us 2 things. Second sentence here: some might view this as a natural consequence of the shift to remote work. And then down to the next sentence: others might see this as an opportunity for companies to innovate and find new ways to foster team unity. Now I'm getting something. Right? I'm starting to see a kind of an unbiased opinion on what might be happening here. Subjective interpretation. To further refine this, I asked this question, followed up with, can you think of an underlying reasons that might support the subjective reasoning you've pointed out, and then reasons that might contradict the subjective reasoning you've given? This is the second part of the model where we're going to look for contrasting reasoning. This is what came back: a list of contradicting reasons and a list of supporting reasons. And it's just stuff that we would have thought of probably, but it gives us a little bit written out here for us to really lean into and think about. And then the last thing we do is we check the schemas. And so I just asked, okay, what schemas can you identify in the above interpretations? Here's what came back. I really love this. Oops, sorry, I can't highlight it, but but right here, a schema is a mental framework that helps us organize and interpret information. I love how the AI was like, there's no way this guy knows what schema means. I'm going to define it for him. But it listed 4 things. And the first one, remote work schema, perceptions and beliefs about remote work. The second one, team cohesion, beliefs about what makes a cohesive team. And then this is the one that stuck out to me, because this is something, as I was looking at this scenario, I hadn't considered. This schema relates to expectations of how management should respond to employee concerns. That's great. There is something in this whole scenario that might just be a test of how management will respond. I had never thought of that. That was really helpful as I thought about answers to the scenario, to the questions here. And then finally, employee well-being. What we've got here with this conversation that I had with AI is a pretty broad framework from which to work. I can start to talk to my peers, I can talk to the team that I work with, and we can start to come up with solutions that address the issue while maintaining the other things that are important. And we have some help here in understanding what they are. AI is a great tool for checking our own biases. When we train it with what's out there on the internet, generally speaking, it'll get enough information out there that the biases will end up in a bell curve, and the most probable stuff will end up in the middle, and it will be somewhat trustworthy. Now, of course, there's always bias, and there's always stuff that's going to kind of get in the way of good information. But if we're intentional, if we are taking steps to address things that would get in our way of giving good information, then we are going to build that credibility. We're going to have that credibility, which leads to all of those things that we talked about. 106% energy from our team, right? Where we're asking them to calm down and cut back on coffee or whatever. One more, I just want to show you one more prompt that I think is a really interesting one. And I'm looking for, I haven't tried it yet, but I'm looking forward to trying this. This is a prompt that would spark a brainstorming session with your AI bot. Generate 30 bold new ideas for, and then you put in whatever topic you want to brainstorm on in a dynamic brainstorming session. Before we begin, ask me questions one by one about the information you need to come up with the ideas. When you have the information required, generate 5 ideas and ask me what I think before creating another batch. What we've done here is we've started a conversation that not only sparks ideas from the AI, but also helps spark ideas from us. This is an actual brainstorming session with artificial intelligence. Sounds fun. I want to try it. That's what I've got for you today. Before we come to a close here, just take a minute. Take a minute and jot down some ideas about what you might be able to apply from what we've discussed today. Here's some ideas for me. This is what I plan to do. I plan to do better to build trust with my team members. I'm hoping to loosen my echo chamber a little bit, let some other information in, check for biases on my own part and see where my echo chamber is maybe a little too loud. I'm looking for ways to evaluate information that I share. I'm going to use that crap model and the SIFT model. I'm going to sift through the crap, I guess. Hey, I never even thought about that. That makes perfect sense. And then finally, I'm going to practice writing these prompts. I'm going to try to get good at writing prompts for AI. And I'm also going to go and make sure that I understand the state policy when it comes to AI so that I don't do anything that would get me in hot water. But that's what I'm hoping to do. Jot down a few ideas for yourself of what you would like to do. And hopefully that will be a helpful thing for you. The idea here, the thing that we're all aiming for is to get the best information so that we can share good information, so that we can build credibility for ourselves and for our teams. That credibility leads to business outcomes. That trusting, that whole idea of building trust within our teams will lead to good business outcomes. That's all I've got for you today. Just a reminder, next month, November 29th at 10 a.m., Tara Connolly will be talking about quiet quitting. She's going to discuss why quiet quitting isn't necessarily negative, how to recognize if your team is prone to quiet quitting, and strategies to re-engage your employees. That's all I've got for you today. Thanks for your time and for your attention. We'll see you next time.